SEC Chairman Mary Shapiro set to testify this morning before the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on how the SEC handled the Bernie Madoff case. Joining us first on CNBC today, Congressman Darrell Issa, Chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Mr. Chairman, good to have you back on the show. This one's interesting. This one's very interesting. You say that a lot of the problems that the SEC has, Shapiro has inherited. But this one sounds like you think was one of her own making.
Well, it certainly seems like a self-inflicted wound. If you had your general counsel come to you, tell you that his family's estate had taken $2 million out of the Madoff fund before, back in 2005, I somehow find it hard to believe you'd say, well, go ahead and help negotiate or advocate for how they determine how much clawback there should be for entities like your family, and not disclose it. It boggles the imagination. We certainly hope that she's got an explanation, but we've talked to every expert we can find. We can't find one that can give us an explanation under what basis he should have been allowed to do this.
Would the committee have known about this had it not been for Picard's suit?
Well, you know, probably not. This was one of those things in which the ethics waiver that he got was not public to us. Obviously, the chairwoman did not make this public, and he didn't make it public. You know, he's told us that he thought this was sort of de minimis. You know, it was peanuts, really, only $2 million. But if you're one of the Madoff victims and you look at getting less or getting more from a class of people like his that inherited $20 million and thinks that $2 million is peanuts, you might be quite offended today.
How, I mean, I guess the next question then is, do you think this is illustrative of a larger problem at the SEC, or is this a contained mistake by them?
Well, you know, the SEC holds all of us that sit on public company boards to a very high standard. If your 20-year-old child works on the shipping dock, you may not be able to be an independent director or an outside stockholder or outside officer of the company. And you look and say, well, wait a second here. I can't be on the board as an independent because somebody's making $30,000 in the company or something as de minimis as that. And yet, they're going to say that $2 million and a general counsel who advocated for less money being clawed back for entities like his isn't a conflict of interest, isn't to be disclosed, and isn't to, in fact, be firewalled off. So these are hard questions that we need answered because it does appear to be a gross error in judgment, one that, to be honest, pales in comparison to anything alleged by Chris Cox or her predecessors.
Will you argue, or do you suspect that the culture that allowed this to happen is the culture that allowed Madoff to not be detected despite being repeatedly warned about Madoff by would-be whistleblowers?
Well, I think you've hit it right on the head. When are we going to get a culture of real, if you will, indignation when they fail to perform as the SEC the way they periodically have for public companies? Look, the SEC's job is so important because ultimately it has to be a zero-tolerance entity that gets public confidence around the world in investing in our markets. Today it's not that, and this incident certainly takes us in the wrong direction.
You know, of course, they will argue, and they have argued, look, we are overworked, we're underpaid, it's difficult to retain talent, we don't have enough inspectors, it's tough for us even to keep pace with the innovation, the financial innovation that's happening on Wall Street. I assume you think those are all valid arguments.
Well, they may have been, but I'll tell you, my predecessor, Tom Davis, argued successfully to lift the caps to allow people at the SEC to make more than cabinet officers, more than members of Congress. And what we found was when one of those people or more were downloading endlessly pornography while making over $200,000 a year, they tolerated that and didn't dismiss the individual quickly. So it's very clear that they want more money, but they don't want more accountability. And our committee's responsibility is to say they have to go hand in hand. We're certainly happy to give the resources necessary to secure the public trust in markets, but not if it simply goes toward waste and an abuse of process inside the SEC that would never be tolerated over regulated companies.
Yeah, some have said, I mean, you say that you're willing to give them the resources. One proposal has been to let their budget be more or less open-ended, or let them retain a larger percentage of the fines that they bring in. Is that something you'd be willing to consider, not having caps on their budget?
Well, there may be a revenue source, an independent revenue source that the SEC could participate in that would, if you will, be more like the Patent Office, where the money is sequestered and they effectively get to use it. But let's be very careful. Simply having them look for ways to create fines to run their budget is something that I think the American people would not, at this point, have trust in this agency to deal with responsible. But there's no question that a revenue source similar to how the Patent and Trademark Office works probably would be the most responsible. But it still begs the question of this independent agency has shown a lack of willingness to do its job and hold itself accountable. That has to come before they come in, as they're doing in the Senate earlier today, and argue for bigger budgets as though that was the problem. You can't look at failed entities only from a budget standpoint. Right. And certainly in the case of Becker, this is not about a budget mistake. This man inherited $20 million and was not willing to disclose that some of it came from Madoff, and that clearly he should not have had a hand in determining how the calculation of what his family would have to pay back should have been. He shouldn't have been in that process at all, and certainly the people who were victimized by Madoff now feel betrayed by the SEC.
We'll be watching certainly the line of questioning and her defense. Mr. Chairman, thanks for your time. We'll see you soon.
You're most welcome. Thank you.